Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. We are in the midst of our topic for this month. We're going to conclude our discussion of our theme for the month, and I'm going to turn it right over to Victoria to give us her interesting material for today's map session.
So, when we talked about primary resources, we looked at it through the lens of oneself. You are essentially your primary resource when you're writing, let's say, from your experience collection. So, those are things that you directly observe or directly investigate, things like field notes, recording what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, putting all of those firsthand bits of knowledge into your story. So for secondary research, what does that mean? Well, secondary just means simply the material has already been digested by somebody else. So they've interpreted it, they've gone through and maybe given their opinion, perhaps given their usage ideas. The material has already been processed in some way. That's why it's called secondary, because you're once removed from the original material. So what could that look like? What could secondary research be? Well, obviously, simple things like newspaper reports or doing research online. Maybe you're reading blogs, looking at videos about a particular time period or a particular event, or even a person. Those are all secondary kinds of research. But let's dig a little deeper. What if you consider things like a costume site or a costume provider? What a cool way to dig into what a period piece could look like. Let's talk to a costumer and see what they have to say about maybe the 1850s and what a soldier or a lady looked like, right? Give yourself a little bit of imagination to think about where you're going to go hunting for information. Other great ideas could include things like journals and diaries. Now, granted, often a diary was written by somebody else, but you're still getting their version of the events, right? It's not a diary that you wrote. It's a diary or a notebook or a journal written by someone else. So they're still once removed from you. But those things can be fantastic resources because you're getting things right from the front line as someone else was experiencing them. So don't discount somebody else's version of events just because it's somebody else's. It still counts as a great secondary resource to consult. That also includes things like letters or things like memos, communications. You would be amazed at how many fantastic novels have been written using things like ledger books or books of records. You can glean great information from those things if you just go and find them. Especially now with our fantastic intertubes, you can find more and more of that stuff online. You don't have to necessarily go to where the microfiche machines live or into where those old dusty ledgers are stored. You can get online and find a lot of that stuff now. So looking for old record books and ledgers can be a great secondary resource. Finally, things like tour guides or books of maps, even travel guides, those can be great sources of information. If you're trying to anchor a scene or even an entire chapter or even a whole book in a particular place, don't discount things like travel guides, Baedekers, old guides to certain areas. Those can be fantastic resources. So when you're thinking about how to inform your story, how to give it that sense of place, that verisimilitude, that feeling of truthfulness, be casting a wide net so that as you look at your sources, not only are you relying on your own observations, but you're also relying on those other people's perceptions that can help you inform that story. So with that, I'm going to leave you there. Next week, here's a tiny tease. We're going to look at how to process this information. And when we get to the writing week, I've cooked up some fantastic exercises to get you thinking about research-driven writing. So that's your preview. We're going to dive in a little deeper. And also, if you really want to go deep, don't forget, the first issue of my monthly newsletter is going to be all about research-driven writing and how to use it. So, Kathleen?
Okay, thank you so very much, Victoria. That is really going to be interesting. And I cannot wait to get my hands on your newsletters to learn more about it. But I sure enjoyed this lesson, and I'm looking forward to our exercise next week where I get to put it into practice. Well, we're talking about the character trait of responsibility this month. And we know that responsibility is something that a person dutifully needs to carry out. It has fallen to them that this job must be done. But we can react in different ways, and so can our character. And our characters are kind of fun to play with because they have a much broader range of reaction than we would ever permit ourselves. So that's a lot of the fun of writing, fiction writing, because we can explore these things way, way out at the edges. So let's take a look at what responsibility looks like at the different positions on the character profile diagram. Well, usually we start out in the rudder position where there's a decision to be made. But I'm going to start out at the pinnacle this time, the oblivious point, the place where the character just doesn't even see the need for any responsibility. This could be a character who is very young, hasn't taken on a sense of responsibility yet. His parents are probably tearing his hair out. When is this kid going to learn some responsibility? This is the fourth pair of gym shoes he's lost, and the semester's only into October. This kid is just not thinking at all about responsibility. It's just not even up for grabs or for debate. You could have another character of that same type for whom responsibility is not up for grabs, and that could be your villain. He has no intention of being responsible. If he thinks he's responsible for anything, it's responsible for getting everything he can get for himself. So he's another one, would not even dream of taking on any responsibilities. Well, now let's take a look at the character in the wing position. We're going to come down a little bit more. Now, what happens when it's in the wing position? When it's in the wing position, your character is actually thinking about it, not very productively, but he is thinking about it. He's probably saying things like, why do I have to be the one to do it? If it's Billy, he's saying, why can't Susie do it? I wash dishes 3 nights in a row. Make Susie do it. So it's the wing position. They're not wanting to take on the responsibility, probably not willing to take on the responsibility, but they're openly struggling against why should you not have, why not me? Why does it have to be me? I don't want it. Another interesting case of a responsibility would be someone for whom the responsibility was literally imposed. Maybe you have a gentleman, he's an elderly bachelor, he's been a single person all his life, and now his sister's daughter is suddenly dumped in his lap, and he's got to raise a child that he's never been in that position before in his life. This kind of a thing is where the responsibility is imposed on the person. And that can have a wing position too, where the person says, wait a minute, I didn't ask for this. I had my life all engineered and it didn't include this. Well, that may well be so, but if it's your responsibility, it's still your responsibility. So we can very easily create a heartwarming tale there where the gentleman warms up to the child. Now we'll talk about the rudder position. Okay, the rudder position, again, we can see this very easily in the teen. With the rudder position, it's up for grabs. Is responsibility going to be taken? Isn't it going to be taken? So we can look at our teen. He knows he ought to get home and watch his kid brother and do his chores and his homework and things like that. After all, he has responsibilities. But his buddy wants to go do something exciting. Maybe a new ice rink has just opened up in town, and come on, let's go over there. And he's torn with, do I follow through with my responsibilities or do I go have fun? And that can play out way late into life with your characters. You can have a 20-something who hasn't settled down to the responsibilities of life, isn't getting his work done, is too busy flirting with the girls in the office. Many different levels you can have this person who's struggling with, am I going to be responsible or am I not? That's, of course, in your rudder position. Now we're going to take the anchor position. The person in the anchor position, it's pretty much, well, yes, I have responsibilities and I carry out my responsibilities. Of course I do. In that case, it would have to be something pretty surprising to knock him off track and make him forget his responsibilities. You really have to build that up carefully because the person in the anchor position almost always is going to come through and meet his responsibilities. And then, of course, you have your person in the base position. A character in the base position can be a very good steady state character to kind of, when your story gets chaotic and wild and there's balls in the air and things are happening, if you have a very stable, responsible person that's your lead character, your hero can talk to, can someone who can help him calm down when the situation gets a little too wild. That's a very, very good person to put into responsibilities. Somebody probably who's a little older, who has a better look at the world. But any position in the character profile diagram can be used with the character trait of responsibility. So the next thing that we have to talk about with it is how do you make transitions from one of these character positions to the other? How does somebody improve on their responsibilities? Well, one of the things that's very interesting is if you've got a character and the responsibility is there in the wing position, and in your story, you've got to get it down to the point where it's in the rudder position. How are you going to move it? How are you going to make the character aware of it? Well, one of the things you can do is think about the voices. In the wing position, you have the voice of failure, which is usually with giving excuses, why not, why not, why not, with a little bit of a struggle voice and probably I probably won't be able to do it voice. So it's kind of a discouraging. There's a discouraging note to it. You can gradually introduce a little bit more of I wonder if I could do that. But what you can really, really do to make it seem reasonable is you can have the character have a different character trait that is in the rudder position where he's routinely not being very good with doing that rudder position. Maybe it's loyalty. Maybe the kid hasn't been super loyal to his family. He's been more interested in being loyal to his buddies, but he's at least capable of being loyal to his family. He just isn't making the right choice as often as he ought to. Now you get him to settle down and be loyal, make the loyal choice several times. Once you've shown him making the loyal choice, now suddenly responsibility becomes within his grasp. And so that is how you bring a character trait down into more manageable, out of the pinnacle, out of the wing, into the rudder, and finally the anchor, is by working with other character traits where the progress is being made in the rudder, because the character is always capable of making progress with the character trait that's in the rudder. In the wing, you think about it, you can get it closer and closer and closer, and maybe you can struggle it into the rudder, but work with one that's in the rudder, get it into the anchor, and the other one will pop into the rudder. Victoria, what can you add to that?
Oh, that is just fantastic. I have to say, responsibility is probably becoming one of my new favorites because it's such an easy trait to manipulate through its courses. So you can really develop a character along. And you're exactly right. It's not something that you have to know a lot about it to be able to manipulate it because it kind of functions the way that we think of responsibility. So guys, that's an easy one to start with. Definitely play around with it and see what you come to, because I think you're going to find it's a really exciting trait to play with, especially when you start toggling those things around. I don't know about you guys. I'm with Billy. I don't want to do the dishes. I want to go to the ice rink. I'm just saying. Kathleen, if people want to hang out with us, where might they find us?
You'll find us over in LiLLiPub.org. It's where we hang out when we're not here in YouTube land. And boy, oh boy, I bet you can almost hear the shouts of glee coming from the LiLLiPubbers who are saying, it's in my mailbox. I mean, literally, they're posting pictures of the book in the mailbox in its envelopes. People are just so excited about the book. Come on over to LiLLiPub.org and join the excitement. Victoria, if they wanted to get their very own copy of Zettelkasten for fiction writers, where would they go?
You would go to victoriacrowder.com. Over there is a fancy little order form. You just fill it out and you're in business. And you too can have this 530-page doorstop that will teach you how to write fiction. So go get your book.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.